Jaclyn Glenn began her YouTube career as an atheist activist. And this is not ancient history. Still to this day, still in the year 2020, she is making videos denouncing religion, advocating atheism. She had a traditional religious wedding. Prayers were performed at her wedding. The name of the one true God of Israel was invoked innumerable times at her wedding. It wasn't just an aesthetic element of her wedding. It was an explicitly monotheist religious wedding, not just in its trappings, but in its explicitly stated content. And yes, a great deal of that was being sung and recited in Hebrew. Gee, why Hebrew? Gee, you know, when you think of all the languages that you could choose to have poetry recited at your wedding, why would you choose Hebrew? You know, a lot of different languages have been part of my life. I guess I could have a Japanese poem recited in my wedding. I guess Laotian, I guess Cambodian. Gee, so many cultures from around the world. You could so. It's because it's the language God chose to communicate with Moses, right? It's because it's the language that the funny little story about Abraham circumcising his own son with a piece of flint rock, with a piece of chipped stone, that was written in. The sacred language of the covenant between the Jewish people and God is Hebrew, right? And this is exactly what you, Jaclyn Glenn, still to this day, May 8th, 2020, you are still preaching on YouTube that you shouldn't just confront this tradition and say that it's meaningless fiction. You should ridicule it. You should mock it. Did you turn to the shofar who was performing at your wedding and mock his religion? Did you engage in an intellectual critique of the rabbi who recited these poems at your wedding? And I want to make one thing very clear. The problem here is not that Jaclyn Glenn is a bad example for others to follow. The problem is Jaclyn Glenn matters in and of herself. I care about her as a person just because she's a person. Doesn't matter that she's famous. Doesn't matter that she influences others. In this context, does not matter. The premise of activism is that you care if you take on the role of activist. If you are a vegan activist, it means you don't have the attitude of, well, I want to eat a vegan diet myself, but you know what other people do in their private homes and their private life. I just don't care. I just don't care if you eat pork or steak or whatever you're into. No, you know, I'm just vegan. That is not an activist, right? An activist is someone who cares. I care about you. I care about the decisions you make. I care about the kind of society we are going to have in the future. We're going to build. We're going to inhabit together. We're going to participate in together. I care. You matter to me. And that's why I'm an activist. That's why I'm explaining to you why you should make the right choice and not the wrong one and adopt a vegan diet. All right? If you are an atheist activist, it doesn't just mean you passively allow the rest of the world around you to go into a downward spiral of fundamentalism. Whether that be Christian fundamentalism or Islamic fundamentalism. It doesn't mean you just sit there and be like, oh, well, you know, I mean, Sudan, it could go either way. I mean, maybe Sudan will now modernize and become moderate and, you know, become a democracy. Or maybe Sudan will, you know, kind of go down the same downward spiral and end up like, you know, ISIS in Afghanistan. It means you care. It means I care about you and you and you in the audience just as much as I care about Jaclyn Glenn. I don't care because she's famous. I don't care because she influences others. I don't care because she's written her autobiography or has done a pin-up calendar wearing a bikini. None of that matters to me. I could not care less about her softcore porn career. To me, it's meaningless. I couldn't care less that she's a fucking living cartoon of everything that religious parents warn their daughters about. That they say, don't leave the church. You'll end up like Jaclyn Glenn. You'll end up coming on the internet, making fucking excuses for using mind-altering drugs like ayahuasca, smoking dope, taking antidepressants, experimenting with other hard drugs, and posing in softcore porn. You're everything Christian parents are terrified their daughter's going to do if they take one step away from the church towards what you call rationalism and reason. All right? None of that matters to me, Jacqueline. Okay? What matters is you're a human being with 2 legs and 10 fingers and 10 toes. All right? Like anyone else, you matter. It matters. The decisions we make matter. To me, I care. I care whether or not you become a cocaine addict. I care whether or not you eat pork and bacon or you make the right choice to become a vegan. I care whether or not you perpetuate this horror story that's lasted for more than 2,000 years. This terrible, terrible religion that began with Judaism. Right? I'm Jewish. I'm born to a Jewish family. My mother and my mother's mother going back for untold centuries. They've all been Jewish, so I count as Jewish genetically. As if a religion can exist within your bloodstream genetically. Okay, but that's the Jewish tradition. Other Jewish people consider me Jewish because that's that's the ideology of Judaism as a religion. Okay, I know. The critique of Judaism on YouTube, it's not even 5% as intense as the critique of Christianity or the critique of Islam. It's not even as intense as the critique of Mormonism or Scientology. Okay, Judaism. People like to go easy on Judaism as a religion, and we all know why. You know what the worst thing is about Judaism? It created Christianity. It created Islam. Those religions devolved from Judaism. Everything wrong with Christianity is wrong with Judaism in principle. Everything wrong with Islam is wrong with Judaism in principle. Everything wrong with the Soviet Union and Communist China can be seen in the writings of Karl Marx in principle in Germany. This is the way history works. Your critique. You put this on yourself, Jacqueline. You wore this crown and you rode it to fame and fortune. You're one of the only fucking people on earth who got rich and famous off of atheism. And you have a traditional Jewish wedding. You have a religious wedding. You have a shofar and a rabbi performing Baruch Atah Adonai in Hebrew at your wedding.